This is going to be the worst news that you can possibly hear today. This is going to be the worst news. But it's unavoidable and unmistakable. This situation right now in Gaza, war between Israel and Hamas, Gaza, Palestinians, whatever you want to call this, is insoluble. There is no answer to this. There is no answer. Let me explain this. This is the part this is what I'm fascinated with. When you look at this situation, which perspective are you focusing on? From whose point of view? If you think this is a matter of, I have determined who is right, who is wrong, and that will somehow lead to a resolution of the matter, you're out of your mind. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter your version of history. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. None. I can't say this enough. None of this matters. People think that because they have this idea of what is and isn't correct, that their version of history, their version of reality, that's all that matters. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. I'm going to tell you the best way for you to deal with this, and something you probably are not going to do. I promise you, most people don't do this. If you want to find out what is happening, listen to the analysis of people you don't agree with. Listen to what people are saying from the, quote, other side. Not everybody, but some. If you keep listening, for example, to Fox News or CNN or whoever it is, if that is your sole reference point, you're through. It's like picking out glass after an accident. You're covered in glass and the windshield is shattered and it's in your hair, and you're picking out truth and falsity, and you're saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is okay, this is not. There is no answer to this. Do you let me see if I can tell you this. And this is counterproductive. Don't call this 9/11. Don't even refer to it as 9/11. It has nothing to do with 9/11. 9/11 was nothing compared to this. 9/11 has no historical reference to this. People use these, and once a phrase, once a catchphrase, once something becomes recognized as accepted, once it happens, once you say, okay, that's what we're going to call it, then that's it. It sticks. Then we get on with a phrase. Let me just tell you something. This is to show you the level of complexity of this. You have to go back and understand the history of this area. Israeli, Palestinian, 1948, go back, listen to this, and I'm telling you, nobody has any interest in this whatsoever. They just expect everything to start from the time they begin analyzing this subject. From the time they open up the book, from the time they look at this, they say, okay, this is what it's about. This is the subject. I've just begun this now. I've just begun reading this. I've just jumped into this story. This is all that matters from my time. And there are people who start off with a reference point where they cannot believe either point is right or wrong, and they don't understand that it depends upon how are you being interpreted in the rest of the world. How does the rest of the world view you? This is the part which I can't explain enough. So let me ask you, first of all, to join us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this. Let's go through this carefully. Let me ask you please to subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit that little bell so you're notified of live streams and new videos. And also understand, and we also thank our great sponsor at My Patriot Supply and preparewithlionel.com right now, especially with a 25% off. There's a discount off a 3-month emergency food kit. And I tell you right now, when I see this, when you talk about disaster, when you talk about commentary, it's so sad that people aren't talking about storing food for, I don't know, a bad weather day. We're talking now about disaster. And that's the world we live in. Preparewithlionel.com, 25% off a 3-month emergency food kit. Go and read the specs yourself. You will be so incredibly amazed. This morning, I spent early and yesterday watching every conceivable interview and view, and I am again, and this is what drives them crazy. I am telling you, which version of this would you like me to deal with? When? Which of these, seriously, dear friends, which of these, what perspective would you like me to hear? We can always talk about our great friends from the Oreo perspective. Thank you so much. Again, I want to meet the genius behind these implementations of support via Oreos and dipping them into milk. Thank you, I think, but thank you. Again, genius, demented, Mondo, thank you nonetheless. Let's go back. Is this or is this not like 9/11? Yes or no? Is what is happening right now 9/11? Is this Israel's 9/11? Is this Gaza's 9/11? Who? Do you know what Gaza is versus the West Bank? No. Do you think this is 9/11? Do you remember 9/11? Do you remember what happened? I do, and nobody wants to talk about it. I do. I was here, Mrs. L and I, we were here. We remember it absolutely. And at that time, everybody in the world, everyone was on our side. Russia came and said, you can, we will help you. We are aware. We have information from the Caucasus and these areas. You can stage. Iran had a candlelight vigil for us in Tehran. The world was with us. It was a coalition of the willing. Everyone. And maybe one of the reasons why one could argue that it was such was that there wasn't an identifiable group per se. Maybe if there was a state that was associated with it deliberately, maybe that would have been different. But in any event, everybody was for us. Everybody. There was no question. Nobody said, well, some might have said, well, the U.S. had it coming, and well, you reap what you sow. Remember that Ward Churchill and chickens have come home. There was a few people here and there, and then of course the whole world just collapsed. But it was this united front. And there are people who are very careful. I was watching, I'm not going to mention necessarily which one, but there's a very popular platform, news platform, team, male, female team. And the distaff version of this was saying, you must take into account Israel's history. Now, this was something. And you could see that her cohort, her vision was looking at her like, okay, Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a good one. When I talk to people, and I, for some reason, have been asked by friends of mine, I don't know why. I've always been the one that people come forward. They say, "No, what do you think about this? What do you think?" I said, "This is orchestrated chaos. This is the destruction of humanity. This isn't going to end. Let me tell you, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of everything. This is the beginning of the global reset. There is more moving parts to this than you can imagine. What particular form of focus would you like? Do you want to talk about Israel? Go ahead. You want to talk about Bibi's Netanyahu's mistakes? Taking an eye off, not paying attention. You want to talk about Egypt basically saying allegations. Hey, we told you it was a warning. There's a heads up here. They were building makeshift cities. When you see the amount of the amount of training that was going on, from what we're hearing, I say this is unbelievable. Now, do you think this does any good? Does this do anybody any good to sit back and start talking about, well, you should have known better? What difference does that make? I sound like Hillary Clinton. Condoleezza Rice mentioned a PDB, a presidential daily briefing, in which the subject was Al-Qaeda or terrorists poised to attack to attack buildings via planes or something. Absolutely said specifically, this was precisely how it happened. What do you think? Now, remember, with anything else, I can throw people off. Let me give you this idea. And this is what I know, because I know a particular crowd. I'm not going to mention, I don't want to mention names, but let me give you one group, one that I watched. And by the way, you learn so much. There are groups of people who say specifically that this was something that was based upon years and years of oppression in Gaza and internal errors and horrible. Okay. And that is it. That remains the focus. You got it? That remains the focus. That this was years coming. When you do this to these people for so long, it's just a matter of time. Okay? That's one aspect of it. Remember, when you look at this issue, it depends. Where would you like to focus in on? Would you like to start there? Because there's a whole lot of people who will meet you. They will say, this was coming. This was horrible. This was, for every story that you have, there is another story. Information and data that was stifled, that was kept down, that was censored, that was ignored, that was whatever. Or people who say, oh, yeah, but what about this? What about this case? You did this too. And then we don't get anywhere. For every atrocity, for every kidnapping, well, we've got a kidnapping too. Yeah, but you did this. Well, you did too. You did too. Yeah, but you kidnapped innocent civilians. And then somebody will say, well, can we show you our videos? And by the way, remember, we have this thing called social media. I can do more with TikTok than you can ever imagine. I can do more with an Instagram account or whatever than anything that Fox News can have. And let me also tell you the level of unsophistication. Do you recognize that when people go on television to talk about certain things, they have a filter? It's like if you were looking at a microscope, and you were looking and you had a particular stain or a particular lens that eliminated from your field of vision areas of, dare I say, areas of color. For example, it filtered out greens, or it filtered out reds, or it did something where it wouldn't allow you to pick up certain colors. You wouldn't know that because you're looking at this and you're saying, oh, I see. It's like, there's no greens there. You're focusing. So when you watch Fox News or anything else for the matter, or if you listen to Al Jazeera or any place, understand the focus. Understand the focus. There is a, again, I don't want to mention, I feel easier saying because I think they do a very good job on understanding the perspective. And by the way, I listen to everyone. But in this one particular viewpoint, they will say they don't recognize anything that Israel's ever said about anything. They don't, Israel, not that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, but they've never, ever, ever conceived that Israel ever had the position of doing anything correctly. Nothing. It is impossible for them. They simply do not recognize at all. It is impossible. And what they will tell you is the reason why they feel that way, the particular basis of their bias, is not that they're anti-Semitic or anything. They just have not, they just know more than you do. They know, they've been there, they've visited, they've been to Gaza, they've been to the West Bank, they've seen this. They know things you don't know. This is what they say. This is what they think. And there's a lot of people who, when you speak and when you listen to them, and there's more than who do not, I don't want to say don't recognize Israel, but Israel cannot do anything and has never done anything correct ever in its history. Do you follow this? Do you understand what I'm saying? They will and they will show you pictures, the most heart-rending photos, videos of children who've lived in rubble, who were afraid, children who were so it's just it's incredible. They will show you situations, and they will Barry Taylor says, despite the news, I simply cannot grok the situation. Indeed, you simply cannot understand to empathize intuitively or whatever. Yes, indeed. It's a very interesting word, grok. It comes from, invented by Robert Heinlein in the 1960s. I like that. I like neologisms. Thank you for that, kind sir. Thank you. So start with that. Start with what I'm saying with this. They do not understand this. Then they look at, and let me just explain something to you. And I'm not done yet. Which side? Because you've got to pick a side. Because I am absolutely, positively, completely fine with taking both sides simultaneously, pro and con, simultaneously. I understand. That's why the problem is insoluble. Because the only way something's going to happen is if everybody says, all right, that's enough. We're just not going to, we're just going to, we're going to go to the ballot box. We're going to go to the international community. We're just not going to do this anymore. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's like knowing crime. I know there are burglaries. I know there are people who commit crime. And I know the only way that crime's going to stop is if people stop doing it. And I know they're not going to do it. Nothing's going to happen. You don't understand it. It does not matter at this point. And it does to an extent. You can go back to some histories. You can look at some of I've heard references to terms that were coined in the 40s and 50s about displacement, that it's like it's burned into their DNA. There were people who came in. You got to understand, it starts off with somebody coming into an area and saying, this is now ours. This is ours. Ta-da. If you live in New Jersey and all of a sudden Delaware comes in and says, this is ours. It's a very simple concept. And the people from Delaware will say, you don't understand. We have a claim to this, biblical or historic or whatever. And the people from New Jersey are going to say, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's the essence of this. It starts with that. It's very simple. It never stopped. And there's no good guys or bad guys, they're just guys. People who, when you meet with them, and it's the role of every particular form of media to demonize the other people. For example, is Iran involved in this? Israel said yes, but it said no. Well, what do you mean involved? Is it involved totally? Did they greenlight it? Do they support it? What does supporting it mean? This is what people are talking about. Is Iran involved? Is Iran involved? Okay, that's one issue. Put that over here. What difference does that make? Oh, it makes a lot of difference. What about that 6 billion? Why are we jumping onto that? So the anti-Biden people can jump on it. So the pro-Trump people can jump. It's political. It's does this matter at this point? Is this critical? Is this critical right now? Trying to find a resolution to this, which you're not going to find, by the way. I'm telling you right now, you're not going to find a resolution. But in your attempts, does it matter? Are we being sidestepped? Are we being diverted by talking about Iran? And whether Iranian influence has something to do with this? Is this the mullahs? Is that okay? You want to keep it? That's terrific. How about you want to play about whose fault was it? If I hear one word, how can the greatest intelligence organization in the world be caught off guard? How many times have you heard that? How many times have you heard people say that? Where are we going with that? Well, if Bibi wasn't involved in his own particular problems with the judiciary, the world was great for the first time. Oh, the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they were getting along great with Israel. It was fantastic. They were traveling. Things were terrific from their point of view. Go to Gaza, go to the West Bank, and they'll say, we don't know what you're talking about. Okay, you got that? Good. Now switch sides. Let me also tell you, you will have other people who will tell people in Gaza, you don't understand. This is your own fault. You wanted Gaza. We left in 2005. What do you want? What do you want? It's Hamas. Blame them. Gaza turns around and said, wait a minute. We had an election. Even Israel wanted Hamas. You didn't want Fatah. Wait a minute. What? Go through that story. Have you heard that one? That Hamas was considered kind of like a little bit less. These calculations are through the world. What? Hamas was kind of like, well, there's not really. Now, when Hezbollah becomes a part of this, now we're talking another story. If and when Hezbollah kicks into this, what happens then? What happens then? What happens to the United States? What happens to the world? What happens to everybody? There is no end to this. There's no solution. There's no, we'll just sit down and we'll hammer this out. There'll be ceasefires, there'll be something. But the inherent problem that is involved in this will never, ever be addressed. Ever. It transcends everything that we've ever done. It doesn't follow the precepts of a war, anything that we've done. This is the focus right now. This is also orchestrated. This is global chaos. This has to do with the destruction of humanity. And it starts with these little stupid, crazy things. Not that this is stupid or crazy, but you don't need China nuking something or no. That would be different. That would be different. What are you going to do when there is, as promised, the systematic execution of people involved in these events? What are you going to think? What do you think is going to happen next? What is going to be our response? What do we do? What do we say? What does the world say? What do you want? Now they're even fine-tuning. Well, did you denounce? But you called for a ceasefire. Well, that's not good enough. You have to denounce Hamas. Wait a minute. Do you? I have to ask. So now there's a way to react to this. I'm telling you, and I don't think I'm getting it across because you've never heard this before. In all of our discussions about something, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, and there is nothing, nothing, nothing. Do you understand this? Nothing. Nothing is like this. Nothing is like this. Nothing. There is no comparison. Edie says that her opinion about this changed after I found out she has Ashkenazi ancestry. Well, I understand that perspective, but let me ask you a question. Ancestry is one thing. Ancestry, perspective, geopolitical provenance, where you are from, and the like. And you bring up a very important point. We have people in this country, by the way, who connect with the fact that they believe they are Irish. I'm Irish. This is my Irish ancestry. The Irish. They've never been to Ireland. They can't speak Gaelic, but they connect with the notion of this. Okay, fine. I have seen people who all of a sudden have converted, not necessarily to religions, but remember, this is a religious component, and this is also a national. This is a state. France. There's two components, unlike anything else. We're talking about a religious to an extent with Judaism per se, but also then there's Israel, and there are people in Israel who support Israel 100% who are Arabs. Now, I mean, or Italian or whatever, but they live there. Again, you see this changes everything. Let me go back and tell you something. There is no end to this. There is the only way. There's no resolution. Nobody's going to say, okay, we were wrong. We're sorry. Let's do a ceasefire. No. And we can blame all day long. We can do whatever we want. Hot Pocket says there are no countries, only companies. Yeah, maybe. And our friends from Domino's, thank you as well. It's again, I shouldn't say, but even in the moment of my greatest moment of geopolitical sobriety, this sober analysis, you come along, and I thank you for your kindness, inapposite though it may be. Let's go back to this. Here is the question. And this is the thing. And let's just focus, if you want, one thing on Israel, okay? Netanyahu. This is the question he asks. And this is what Israelis, let's look at it from his point of view. Don't like him, don't dislike him, just look at this objectively, okay? Just look at this objectively. When citizens tell him or ask him, is Israel still Israel? What do you say? That's the first question. This is no matter what anybody says, the left, the right, it doesn't matter. Everybody who is an Israeli asks the question, have we lost our national sense of identity? What was their thing? Their word became tough. Mr. Fox says, please pardon the naivete. However, how has Hamas been allowed to exist and govern? Because it was an election. It was an election. Silver, this makes a lot of sense. There was an election. At the time, The problem that existed then was PLO, Fatah, Arafat. This guy was the problem. Many thought that Hamas would have been this wonderful kind of a dilute. Let these guys come in. Let Hamas come in. And at the time, Hamas wasn't Hamas now. Let them move it. Let them counter. And they won exclusively. They crushed Fatah. They crushed them because of the they couldn't make up their mind, the corruption. It wasn't even possible. Extra Mile says, might as well blame Abraham, the handmaiden, and their son Ishmael. No, but I understand your take on that. But that's no. Again, blame. And you bring up a good point, Mile. Is there a blame here? Do you blame somebody? Do you blame when the Black Power movement, there was more of a militant Black Power, though it wasn't the same as the militant leftist movement, SDS and Weather Underground and that sort of thing. But do you blame anybody for them rising? What caused this? Was it the Vietnam War? Was it where? How do you blame? Again, we always look for causation. They wanted to, Hamas was their choice. This was their election. They wanted this. Now remember, from our point of view, American, Fox News, I always look at Fox News almost to the point of don't think about it this way. I swear to you, they oversimplify. Jack Keane, the General Jack Keane, absolutely, positively the worst. The worst. And people love him because he's a general, retired general. We love military. We love people who are kind of tough. He has a good affect. But he's from the Institute for the Study of War, the Kagans and the Newlands. This is so complicated. War is money. War is, there are folks. If I told you, if you think you are a conspiracy theorist, if you think that you are a tinfoil hat lunatic, if you think that you are some kind of a nut, some lunatic from whatever, if you think that, you have never, ever seen anything until you try to break down this notion of the world of who's really in charge of what, who really is in charge of what, who was paid to say this, who was what, how does the world work? Do people right now really care, many people, about the treatment of folks in different parts of the world? The answer is sort of. Deplorable Dave says the news keeps telling me this was Israel's 9/11. So is the news foreshadowing another excuse to take oil and resources from the Middle East? Well, it's interesting. I would suggest, Dave, no. What they're saying is they're using this differently. It might be their Pearl Harbor. Now, let me explain something to you. Again, when you think, I want to say stop before you say Pearl Harbor. There are many, many people who believe that Pearl Harbor was either known about ahead of time or was actually instigated, pulled off, that it was a false flag. I'm not going to go there. But there are people who use Pearl Harbor as as an excuse. Okay, Pearl Harbor cemented us against the Axis, against Japan, and eventually against Germany. But it instigated us. Do you know what this has done? This took the people of Israel, this area. Remember, they have two people, Gaza and West Bank. This is unheard of. Their quote enemy right there, okay, living in their country, their enemy theoretically, if you like that term, enemy. It took these people, and what happened, which was the most important, and I can't say this enough, it took these people, and what did it do then? Interesting. It took these people, and it merely intensified that which they already believed. It changed. It changed. Think about this. The structure. Did it turn Israel against Hamas? No, they pretty much was the case before. Did it turn Hamas against Israel? No, it was pretty much the case then. Well, what was it? What do you call this? See, these are things which fascinate me. So is it a 9/11? Is it Pearl Harbor? It doesn't have any. It intensified that which was already there. And now you're showing people. This is the part. This is the thing which I find to be the most fascinating. This is the part which I find to be the most fascinating and what nobody really gets and nobody wants to think about because of the fact that it's something that does not lend itself necessarily to what am I trying to say? It kind of, it's sort of, oh, I don't know what the word is. It sort of kind of makes people, again, forgive me for this because there is no comparison. It sort of dehumanized, I shouldn't say the wrong word. It hurt, harmed, whatever you want to call it. This notion of Israeli invincibility, which is the thing which is important because that goes to the notion of the identity of a people. When you talk about the identity of a people, it was a part of who they were for Israel to always feel that they were militarily superior. This was what they believed in. Militarily, technologically, strategically, everything they did. The word Israeli weapons, Israeli Krav Maga. I remember they said, would you rather learn Israeli self-defense or Canadian? I know that's a silly, but the word, the cachet, the connection, the thinking that was involved, it had something. It was like, these are the baddest of the bad, the toughest of the tough. These were the folks who really, right? And now they're asking, but are we still doing it? How can these people do this with paragliders? We find out later they had a makeshift, they had a little city they were using as, they didn't know this. And now we're getting a bunch of people saying this is a lie hop. Let it happen on purpose. Make it happen on purpose. Let it happen. Egypt says, we warned you. Israel saying, no, you didn't. Yes, we did. No, you didn't. Throw that into the mix. Hot Pocket says, I am betting that very few, if any, of the 1,000 Hamas militants were either Palestinian or even Muslim, for that matter, and are no different than the thousands of men piling in through our border. Mr. Pocket, let me bring something to your attention that you bring up so wisely, and I thank you for your thoughts and contribution. This is the part which I think is really scary. This is the part that's scary. Let me explain this. I want to use a term, and I've used the term before, cancer. I hate to use the term all the time because even the word itself is so horrible just to even say it. But let me say this. The thing about cancer is when it spreads. If it remains in situ, if there's something that is, if you say, well, we've seen this, but you know what? It's right there. It's localized. We've taken it out. There's no markers. It's just there. It hasn't spread. It hasn't spread anywhere. That's what this is. This is what I fear the most. A group of people who say, this is part one of a general, collective, international movement to spread, to metastasize, to become metastatic. This movement all over the place. We want to show you the word is going to be border. Follow me through this. What if, and I told you, we have friends in law enforcement, we have people that we know, we have people who are involved in this. What if I were to tell you, and this is the most important, what if I were to tell you that for years, when all of our border breaches took place, when all of these people coming in that we never knew about, unaccompanied men, these single men who just showed up, seemingly innocuous, just kind of coming in, doing jobs at first. You see them all over New York. They're doing delivery and they're driving these scooters. We have this proliferation overnight. Overnight in New York, there is this group, there are these scooters, these folks, these people that are involved in this. I don't know what you want to call it, but these folks, and they drive these devices. They drive these devices, these cars and these little scooters, and they're everywhere. They're not motorcycles, they're not mopeds, they're like in between. They don't have licenses. We have paper. I don't know about you, but we have in our area, for some reason or another, paper license tags everywhere. Everywhere. On cars, paper. Like they just went to a copy machine and did dealers, and it's just paper. Nobody stops them because the police have been turned off. The police have been kind of like the early warning system. They've been a part of our response system. They've been a part of our our immune system, so to speak, when it moves in. Okay. We don't know where these people are. We don't know where they've gone. We don't know what. Do you know how easy it would be for all of a sudden somebody to initiate some type of a code or signal and to awaken this sleeper cell of very scary people for reasons that you and I can't even comprehend? Do you have any idea of what that means? Do you? Do you have any conceivable idea of what that means? What would we do then? What would happen? What would we do? All of a sudden, because remember what the whole notion, there's different forms. We use the word terrorism, and it's a word which I think has lost all of its meaning completely. All of its meaning. It's a word that we use as a pejorative. Warfare takes on different levels. There are guerrillas. Remember that? Guerrillas. These are people who don't necessarily wear uniforms, and these are people who don't necessarily look as though us. The VC and the Viet Cong and NVA. We really learned this in Vietnam, like you can't believe. And we even started before when we had ragtag groups in the Revolutionary War. But anyway, so we have these new people. But we call them terrorists, but in fact, I think it misses the point. They are active enemy combatants, enemy people who are basically targeted and directed to cause harm, to kill, disrupt, destroy property, but they may not be from a battalion, a regiment, a division, a squad, a platoon. They may not have, ranks and that sort of thing. They're a different people altogether. What happens if the hundreds of thousands, who knows, millions? We don't know, who all of a sudden get this message. All of a sudden, they act, and you see nothing but controlled mayhem and then recessed back into their world. And then we are hit with the ultimate inhuman ransomware. If you want this to stop, pay us, or do this, or don't do that. Remember this? Barry Taylor says, I remember Fatah trying to negotiate, but there were political disputes with Hamas, and on it goes. Well, listen, there have been negotiations, and if you want to figure out the Oslo Accords, the Abraham Accords, please, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Good luck, okay? I don't know what to. I don't know. I couldn't be there have been when I hear something happens with the accords and the talks, the only ones that ever worked were, for example, with the Sinn Féin and others, and the IRA and the provisionals and the Good Friday Agreement, and blah, blah, blah. Those kind of worked out. But let me go back to this. Let's assume I'm working and I'm doing like a Tom Clancy kind of a movie. By the way, Tom Clancy, as you know, was a spook. He was funded and basically part of the intelligence organizations that infiltrated and made wonderful stories about things that promote Born Identity, Hunt for Red October, propaganda in any event, which is fine. But what happens if all of a sudden there's these people and they recess back? Who are they? All of a sudden they come out, they do something in a timed effort and then recess back. That was a Tet Offensive. That was the Battle of the Bulge, if you think about it. That was, as McGregor says, the Little Bighorn. Think about this. What would that be? Freak out, and then they go back, and they disappear. What drove many, many American soldiers absolutely nuts was that during Vietnam, many of them never even saw the enemy. They never saw the enemy. Now, when I do things, when I think of things, when I imagine myself, I'm writing a story. I'm writing a news story. I'm writing a magazine. I'm writing a script. And I'm saying, what would I do if I were to try to affect somebody? What would I do? Think about the notion of terrorism, as we call it, and let's just use it as a term, and let's not argue. It's economy. It's very cheap. You don't need a lot of equipment. Your battleground is what we used to call the newspapers, the front page, media. And what it does is you go into a group of people and you tell folks that we are going to prove that you cannot trust yourself anymore. You cannot trust your own safety. You don't know where we are. General Giap in Vietnam, through the Vietnam War with the NVA, had these programs where all of a sudden there would be these skirmishes. He'd say, grab them by the belt, close combat, and then gone. They violated every rule. They receded, they retreated, they whatever. And people said, what the hell was that? One of the most effective means of warfare. Forget Sun Tzu and all that other nonsense. Warfare has a lot of times nothing to do with killing your opponent. Nothing. It has to do with what do you want to do? Sometimes that makes people a martyr. Right now, let me explain. There is a battle for information. And the information that's being presented to the world is one of two things. Number one, if you show the pictures of these horrible, heart-rending, terrible pictures of videos of mothers crying over their children, over their daughters. Please bring my daughter home. I'm a mother. I've seen people cry. It's incredible to see the woman taken off on a motorcycle. Goodbye. Maybe the last time anybody, you're watching a kidnapping. To see a woman in the back of a truck, people, bodies strewn about, paraded. To see this, children. Okay, That is it. Okay, that's the first. That is going to change drastically any kind of military action on the part of Hamas, if that is what people are told, and if that's what people believe, and if that is the overriding reference that they see. Now, the other side is going to be other people who are going to say, for every one of those photos, we have our own. Would you like to see our photos, our videos? Would you like to see them as well? No. Would you like to see this? No. So who's it going to be? How do you do this? Then when you have the IDF or the defense, the Israeli defense folks saying, we're going to turn their water off, their power off, their gas, their electricity, we're going to shut this down. That may play well in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem or Haifa, but for the rest of the world, they're saying, wait a minute. So who's winning the battle of the media? Who's winning the information? Do you see what's happening? This is not about hostages. It's about what's next. Now we're getting into people who are going to start backing off. Israel was making tremendous progress with the Emirates, and oh my God, it was Saudi Arabia, MBS. People were saying, you know what, we're really doing well. What happens now? What happens now? What happens now? Now, listen to me with this, and listen carefully. It's now being alleged. Now, remember, I always say alleged because you never know what's true, but it's being alleged that the weapons that are being used, the weapons that have been confiscated, the weapons that have been seized on the part of Hamas and others and the fighters were basically either Ukrainian weapons sold in the black market or those that were left in Afghanistan. So inadvertently, what we are suggesting is that we, the United States, are in essence funding this by selling it. This is the argument, selling it to Ukraine, who then turn around and use it against us. So now you have that. Now also, speaking of which, when people are overly saturated with war and with destruction and the loss of life, you can't do it in two different theaters. What does this do to the focus, to the momentum, to the acceleration, to the idea of Ukraine and Russia? What happens? Are you able to separate your feelings? Are you able to say concomitantly, okay, I can handle two of these? When you hear this, for those of you, for example, let me ask you a question. If you had two videos to watch, two news stories, two news platforms, two websites, two, whatever you want to call it, one about Hamas and Israel or the latest regarding Ukraine, what would it be? What would it be? Have you noticed that for the longest time, and by the way, I've always, some of the best, there's been some wonderful commentary regarding Ukraine, and I mentioned Judge Napolitano and McGregor and Scott Ritter and the Duran, and I mean, just fascinating. Okay, I don't know about you, but that has hit a stalemate for so long. I don't know what happened, what didn't happen. We were just waiting for that has to just go away. That's been pushed. I think we said, okay, that's everybody okay. Now let's back up. Let's put this behind us. Let's undo this. Let's stop with this. It just lost its oomph. It lost its, how do we say this? It just doesn't have the same pull, the same news, the same, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't do it. The story now is this because of the personalities. See, you've got Bibi, you've got Israel. Who's running Hamas? Do you have faces yet of this? Do you really? Americans do not know Hamas, Hezbollah, is Islamic Jihad, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Authority, Al-Aqsa Brigade. Then we forget ISIS, ISIL, remember Daesh. remember Boko Haram. I mean, all this. Like, wait, what? But now the word is Hamas, or Gaza, and then West Bank, and people. And I'm telling you right now, the majority of folks, the majority of Americans who still have not gone to their map is something I will never understand. How they have not gone to their maps. They have not gone to say, let me look at where this is. Look at where this is. This is Egypt. I'm not talking about 1948, 1967, 1973. I'm talking about right now. Look at where it is. War is about terrain, weather. It's about, is it urban versus jungle versus water versus mountain versus sea versus whatever this is. And not only that, when you have this thing, this notion called the kind of like the fighting spirit, when and keep an eye on this, look at how, and you have to, it depends upon where, if you watch Fox News, you're never going to see anymore. You have to go around the world. Look at how this is being portrayed. If they depict Hamas in particular as these very clever, not terrorists, but kind of like MacGyver types of, people who can put things together and use discarded items. And when you start to capture the imagine, and if not the imagination, but if the media ever portray them to be this, how do I say this David to the Goliath, whatever you want to, interesting, because I think Ashkelon that was Samson, I forgot. In any event, if that's the way it's portrayed, watch what happens. Now, what role do you think individual protests have? Here in New York, we have people, they stand up, and you will have somebody standing there with a microphone who looks like he's been straight from the Al-Aqsa Brigade, and they're yelling terrible things about Jewish people. Does that help? What does that do? What does that do? What do these protests do? The answer is they add volume. They don't make a difference one way or the other. Of course, you expect them, but it goes to show you the volume. That's number one. Number two, how is it that people, in showing support for either Palestine, what do you call it, or settlements or Gaza, whatever, how is it that they can just, they don't say anything? They don't ever talk about what just happened regarding kidnapping and murders and deaths and all that. How is that? How is that missed? How is that missed? Why doesn't that come up? I find that to be something fascinating. How does that come up? Think about it. Who's handling what? Next, what happens in terms of the election? How is Biden handling this? When you hear that President Biden called, that President Biden was involved, that President Biden, you almost laugh. It's sad. You laugh at the notion of President Biden involved in this. You laugh. This is the worst thing possible for the Democrats. Now, you still have Russia, Ukraine. You still have that. You still have all of this. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Blinken doesn't know what he's doing. Kirby doesn't know what he's doing. Nobody's saying anything. Nobody's even remotely coherent. For the Democrats, this will mean they have to necessarily accelerate the removal or the replacement, I should say, of Biden with Gavin Newsom. Next, what does Bobby Kennedy yesterday? I feel bad for him in a way because nobody really is listening to anything about him. Nobody's really talking about him. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe the media collectively said this guy is going to be terrible news for the Democrats, and media is in fact the propaganda arm of the Democrats, and maybe that's a good sign. But what about Bobby Kennedy? What about that one? That's a fascinating take. A fascinating take. That's interesting. What's going to happen there? How does he play this? What is the official? He could, thank God he pulled away from the Democratic Party. But what is he going to do? How does he handle this? What does he say? Now that he's independent, that's terrific. What's his position regarding? Because you better have a position. Now, there's one thing about Trump. This is the greatest thing for Trump ever. This is when Trump would be perfect. Trump would have absolutely no problem whatsoever. And the people who would be very afraid of this would be, in fact, Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever it was, because Trump would be 100% behind Israel, 100%, and then some. And he would have been absolutely unequivocal in his support. There would be no doubt in anyone's mind. None. He wouldn't care what you thought. He wouldn't. It doesn't matter. And that is what folks in that neck of the woods appreciate. They appreciate it. They respect somebody who holds their position, says what they believe, and sticks to it. And you can disagree with it all you want, but they appreciate that. And is Trump utilizing this enough? No. Is he owning the story? No. He's too busy worrying about court cases and stuff like that. The moving parts to this are incredible. Remember, there is no solution to this. There is none. There's no answer that if you study, go, oh, I just found out who's right and who's wrong. Doesn't matter. It's relative to where you are. It depends where you are. They will tell you, you don't understand this. This is war. Yeah, but you did this, but you did this. And you will never get out of that. You will never get out of it. So pick a side, make up your mind, or do what I do and sit back and just analyze this. Take everything in. Your goal is to understand it. Whether I agree with something or not, it doesn't make any difference. I want to understand it. Tell me the parties. Tell me what their position is. Tell me what it is that I don't want to say this the wrong way. It's not, it's a foreign matter. It's not an American matter, but it is. And let me finally leave you with this. The thing you better be the most frightened of. The most frightened is, what does this mean regarding people getting similar ideas who decide to maybe come into our country, or groups of folks who are themselves involved in, well, how do we say this? Sleeper cells, or folks who have been left off. What about them? How does that work? How does that work? Sleeper cells. And now I have, again, a private channel that does not have any consideration or any limitation or any censorship regarding things that are said. It's far more aggressive, far more brutal, far more blatant, far more seemingly discourteous to the people who deserve discourtesy. I invite you to join us on that. This is very good. But remember, we're always trying to comply and comport with the rigors and the rules of limitations of expression. And that's a reality. Don't forget our friends at preparewithlionel.com, my friends. Save 25% off a 3-month emergency food kit. 25%. Go to preparewithlionel.com. And also our friends, mypillow.com. They are still there. They are still rocking and rolling. Mypillow.com, promo code Lionel. Now is a chance they are selling sheets to the wind, as they say. Also, use promo code Lionel and receive a free gift. No purchase necessary. Now, in the meantime, dear friends, I want you to remind you of this. I want you to focus on this. Learn as many things as possible. Spend your day as an autodidact. Learn, read and listen to people you don't agree with. You have to understand what the quote enemy, and I use that term loosely, but what the other side is saying. Listen to what they're saying. You will never be able to understand this if you just watch Fox News. If you watch Fox News, I heard people. I'm not going to mention, but there's this one I was listening to. There was a woman. She has her own kind of podcast thing, and she was trying to out tough everybody, and referring to Hamas and people in Gaza and the Palestinians as every kind of pejorative you can imagine. And it sounded precisely the same way that the wrong people or that people use regarding other ethnicities and religions that we find hateful, barbaric, discriminatory, racist, whatever. But yet, because somebody said, it's okay with this group, I thought, remember, it's very easy to pound your chest, pound the desk, scream and yell about who's right and who's wrong. It's another thing to understand nuance. And the nuances, the gradations of this are like no other story ever. I'm telling you, and I'm sorry to say this, there's no solution to this. There's no ceasefire. None. There's just lulls. This is like nothing you've ever heard. There is no such thing. Remember when? No, there is no remember when. You've got two groups of people, in essence, many, many more, but two basic ideas where they're saying, I'm not budging. That's exactly what it is. And you can call it whatever you want. You can analyze, you can use history, you can do whatever, but that's where we are right now. All right, dear friends, have a great, 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 great day. We will talk to you later. 7 p.m. tonight. Please keep thinking. Please keep reading. Please keep praying, if you will. And don't forget, as we speak next time, remember, the monkey's dead. The show's over. Sue you. Tat, tat.